I'm Stephen Henry Madoff, the chair of the master's program in curating at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. It's a program, it's a 2-year master's program in every aspect of professional practice. And each week we have the Curatorial Roundtable, where I invite a distinguished curator or institutional director to speak about their practice. And I'm happy to have Ray with us today. Raimundas Malašauskas is a Lithuanian independent curator currently living in Brussels. And now I'm reading for a moment from his long bio that I'm shortening because he's done so many exhibitions over time. From 1994 to 2006, Ray worked as a curator at the Contemporary Art Center Vilnius. Following his departure from CAC Vilnius, he's curated projects worldwide. He served as an agent for Documenta 13. He released Paper Exhibition, the book of his selected writings, in 2012 from Sternberg Press. Co-curated the 9th Baltic Triennial of International Art in Vilnius. That was in 2005, the 9th Mercosur Biennial in 2013, the 9th Liverpool Biennale in 2017. His most recent projects are Trust and Confusion, an 8-month-long live art exhibition at Taekwon Contemporary Hong Kong, 2021, 9/14, the Russian Pavilion at the 59th Venice Biennale, which was closed, and I know he's going to talk about that. And Mars Returns, a 14-hour-long event at the Zilinskas Gallery, Kaunas, Lithuania, 2022. He's also the co-author of the opera libretto for Cellar Door by Loris Greu, Ballet de Tokyo, 2008, and interestingly co-produced a television show, CAC TV Vilnius, 2004 to 2006. His project, The Clifford Irving Show, dealt with notions of truth, identities, and play, and that was from 2008 to 2010. Hypnotic Show has been his longest-lasting project from 2008 on, an exhibition that takes place through hypnosis. And he's taught at the California College of the Arts, the Sandberg Institute, the Impulsdance Festival in Vienna, and HEAD in Geneva. And with that, I will just say that Ray will speak for about 45 to 50 minutes, at the end of which you can enter your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And with that, welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm thrilled to be here, honored, and I look forward to possible conversation. To me, it's always exciting to have a conversation with people I know or people I meet for the first time. And in retrospect, I realized that like many things that I've been doing or I've done, they also came from conversations, or they found me in conversations. And that's probably a separate topic, but I've been thinking how like conversations can be that tissue where things emerge and of course also submerge, and they have their own logic. Often there is no clear beginning, there is no clear end. You're always in the middle of the conversation. And I think I very consciously and at the same time like intuitively practiced that mode for a long time, and I've been practicing it. And let's say it also plays me as a subject of conversations. And when you invited me to do our curatorial roundtable, I thought of maybe a bit of a different approach, in a sense of trying to identify like some beginning, some middle, some future, let's say, to historicize a bit. And therefore I chose like 3-4 last projects of the last like 3-4 years And I will talk about them in a linear order, like from 2019 to 2022.
Okay.
And just like as a disclaimer, I realized like, and I don't know how it is for you, whoever is in the connection now, but I realized how to make a simple presentation of things that you do as an artist, as a curator, as whoever working with images and content, it's becoming more and more challenging because we are doing presentation like all the time in our daily lives. Like we are sharing images, we're sharing thoughts all the time, like on multiple platforms and multiple channels. We're performing ourselves, which is another probably topic, but in terms of the contents, images, snippets of conversations, and let's say communication of projects, nothing, at least like, you know, in my life, nothing is anymore in one place. And therefore, like when I need to prepare something like, which seems to be, could be simple, but it's not simple at all, because suddenly you realize you have much more material than you ever had for any previous projects. Let's see, if I would look into some of my projects from 20 years ago, you open a folder and sometimes it's like one text file and like 20 images, and that's it. But now we live in a very, very different world, and I have no idea what it will be like in 5 years or in 10 years. But let me try to make some sense of it as I'm trying to kind of like quasi or pseudo historicize here. I go back to 2019 and let me share the screen. So what you see is a set of dice from the collection of Ricky Jay, that many of you probably know, a magician who appeared in many Hollywood films. And he was also a collector of all kinds of tools and devices connected to magic and deception and luck and playfulness at large, let's call it. So you see the Chinese version of the leaflet that we produced, and I'll just read a bit like what I wrote together with Shueton, curator at Tai Kwun Contemporary in Hong Kong. Trust and Confusion is about the conversation of certainty and chance, the transformative power of bodies, intangibles, and ephemeral encounters, music and magic, and the luck of being alive, with all the concerns that come with it, be they human or not. Evolving, accumulating, the exhibition unfolds over several episodes, on site and online, from now to the end of the year. Trust and Confusion turns the white cube space into a fluctuating environment that hosts activities and sensations. It transforms this space in favor of movements, interactions, and deep listening for ears and bodies. A new relationship of you and I, along with new associations and experiences, shares this temporality. There are several visible performances taking place as you enter, and several invisible ones, mostly new works from an intergenerational, international, and cosmopolitan group of artists. And I will now try to show a video.
They are the current state of the world and the most constant and contradictory feelings in our lives. They are not opposition in our thinking for this project, They are companions to help us to understand the non-binary realities.
Would you board a cruise ship that is called Trust and Confusion? When things evoke something confusing, it would be avoided by people. And within the art space, we can deal with it differently. This 8-month-long exhibition evolves and accumulates throughout time. Artworks will be changing, things will be disappearing, others will be appearing. The role of a dice has been quite symbolic for the show.
So this exhibition is so much about chance.
And abolishment of chance too. So it's about that conversation of trust and confusion and certainty and chance in some multiple roles interchanging often. Some people ask me, oh, have you actually rolled dice to make decisions on making the exhibition? That actually I feel myself a bit like a dice that is moving through different circumstances and getting affected by all of them and affecting it. So it's a passage of rolling and especially going through
being
the year.
Pushed around through different forces.
Exactly.
What we spoke about for this exhibition, the transformative powers of bodies, that's magic. We started to think about this exhibition from 2019 when we thought art space that is normally conceived as a safe space can be a space to connect our communities.
你們生活在安全無虞的生活裏。晚上回家。
With the pandemic, we become more isolated. That's when we thought performance art and live art are essential for this project.
這算不算是個男人？
The exhibition is alive, so every artwork requires attention or participation.
On one of the walls there is an inscription by Alice Chauchat. She says the text on the wall is not a document of something outside the reader. It is a score, a set of instructions for you to follow. Once you follow the score and pay attention to the movement it describes, you are in the piece. Whenever someone is following the score, the piece is active.
Prepare. 準備。
And we have our performers in the space, and they have different feelings for different visitors.
Safe location and route.
Sometimes very emotional, sometimes very touching, and a few times maybe unpleasant.
Performers for Xavier and Scarlett, they role in the interactions with visitors.
Hi, hello, I'm Mickey. Have you heard about Still in Hong Kong?
And they collect all the dust of conversations and carry to the next conversation. I'm sure that it transpires.
The exhibition is also responding to the situation we are living in now. The next episode will depend on how the world is improving.
Everything what happened throughout those months, it's gonna carry like a dice.
I'm never anything but philosophical. I'm never anything but philosophical.
An exhibition is a lot about what we call the luck of being alive. Because there are so many reasons for us not to be alive. It's just sometimes like a very slim chance that we are here and talking and sensing and conversing.
This exhibition is about being alive, good and bad, all that come with it.
So this is Trust and Confusion. As Shue was saying, it's an exhibition about all those things that come with being alive in the world, good and bad, and millions of things in between. And as she was also mentioning, this project was conceived already in 2019. And in fact, it took place in what you see in the video is actually the midst of the pandemic year. It's 2021. And somehow we managed to do this project that lasted 9 months. And mostly it was live activities like communal interactions, events, performances, plays.
What made you think of it, Ray, to begin with? I mean, those notions of truth and deception are about, what should I say, the reliability of the world or the unreliability of the world, of contingency, repetition, chance, change. You conceived it before the pandemic began, I presume?
Yeah, it was conceived more like in the wake of protests in Hong Kong. And somehow we thought that an art space could function as a sort of like a, not a shelter, but like a safe space for people to maybe find each other again. And not necessarily reconcile, but like to engage into some like new bonds and conversations. So that's when it was conceived. And then the pandemic came. And it added, of course, like a totally new grid in which this project was unfolding. So you can imagine that, like, of course, like, you know, the notion of truth and uncertainty, all of it play into it. And we prioritized the sense of a body as something that could be truthful in whatever like circumstances you are in, and also like the sensual bond with other people and with other entities. And of course, like, I also don't want like, you know, to go into like topics like, you know, fake news or like, you know, I mean, all the topics that emerged in the last like 5 and 10 years, well, let's say 5 years. And for us, like, trust and confusion was just a way to kind of go beyond binary oppositions, like truth and lies. So when you speak about trust and confusion, both are certain like parameters, and both are malleable. And you experience both, like, you know, often in the same situation in life. Like, you know, you can experience both in a simple interaction with like you know, another person in an elevator. So it's for us, it seemed like quite useful operative categories to play with.
I mean, while you were talking, I was looking it up so that I could remember, you know, Mallarmé's poem, "A throw of the dice will never abolish chance."
Exactly.
So I'm thinking of Ricky Jay and his dice.
Yeah, I'm very glad that piece from Ricky Jay collection was in the show. Because what it actually is, it's a rotten dice. It's a dice from the 19th century that is made of the same like celluloid material that supposedly early film was made in Hollywood. And it's simply like falling apart. So of course, like, you know, you can speculate about like the abolishment of chance also, or the rotten luck, as they call it.
But the video, interestingly, for me anyway, and of course it's meant to be promotional in a way, but it, you know, it doesn't feel like corruption. It doesn't feel like things are falling apart and the center will not hold. You know, it feels there's a wonderful kind of imagination at work, I guess, you know, the curatorial imagination, but obviously the imagination of the artists, and it feels very positive. No?
It was very positive, and somehow like conversation and life affirming. And that notion of life that was emphasized by this project somehow like also expanded, I think, to the next projects that I was doing, like what it is to be alive, and what life are we talking about, also, like, you know, from whose perspective, like, you know, whose life, what is like what is that good life that, let's say, like, you know, the different ideologies are promoting, and who are those who are, like, let's say, excluded from good life, what good life is, and so on. But let's say in this project it was more about also like live performance. So there was like this multiplicity of meanings through life. And we had a few pieces that were what we call like life retrospectives. We asked 3 photographers to make a compilation of their work that could be considered as a life retrospective. So a retrospective that you can actually experience, let's say, in 20 minutes, and that can still encompass like what that life of a senior photographer was.
Well, I mean, I know you're going to go on to talk about 914, but it feels like there's something very much about, how shall I put it, all the planning that one can do in one's work and in one's life in a moment changes, can drastically fall apart, as 914 and the situation with Ukraine and Russia portends and then implodes.
Yeah. Well, Trust and Confusion starts in a way like, you know, in the wake of Hong Kong protests, goes through the pandemic, and then we arrive to something as abrupt and tragic. Let's say that not as something that like I have witnessed in my life before. Because just to like give a certain like also historic like biographical sense, like I was born in Soviet Union in Lithuania, in Vilnius, and I was 15 years old when the Soviet Union has collapsed. So let's say like I'm definitely like shaped by that system in some way, in a fundamental way. And I was talking to my friend Rene Gabri a couple of days ago, and I was telling him how like I tried to desovietize. No, actually I was telling to another person, and then Rene, like from another room, he just commented, "But you never succeeded." My desovietization somehow like got stalled in some way. But at least like after that system collapsed, there was a sense of like a relative peace and opening up in Europe, like that was ongoing for like good 30 years up until last year. So it was a very specific period. And to go to 914, let me share the screen again.
That sense that you're talking about of trust and confusion, or trust, you know, I was talking about trust and deception as well. It feels like desovietization is something that comes with risk too, right? So an oppressive system is also a system that holds in place until it doesn't. And that feels like a kind of existential condition that is part of what you're doing, no?
Good remark, Stephen. Yeah, existential condition, exactly. But what do you see on the screen now?
Nothing. Yeah, it's not showing up.
Interesting how it all works. Let me try again.
Mm-mm. No, it's just a kind of black gray
with like a
angle.
cursor like moving, no?
Exactly.
Well, but you know, to be honest, why not? Like, let's use it as a sort of like an opportunity for a mini performance, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I mean, like, you know, given that this pavilion got closed, I think to watch black screen is not such a bad thing.
Okay.
So I'll just read a few paragraphs of how I was describing in writing what 914 is going to be. And 914 is was the title of the Russian pavilion that I was doing together with Alexandra Sukhareva and Kirill Savchenkov, two brilliant Russian artists.
Before you start, somebody's written, can you make the image bigger again? So since we're not seeing an image, maybe stop sharing and there you go.
So you prefer to see me rather than the blank screen? Okay.
Apparently.
Okay. The signals of the exhibition are perceivable before you enter the building of the Russian pavilion. A sound of cicades, recorded, altered, and played backwards by Kirill Savchenkov, emanates from the inside. The inverted melody hints at multidirectional flow of time and the invisibility of the life below the ground, where cicades live for many years before emerging in a short-lived daylight. The life from below the ground keeps reminding of itself in the rest of the exhibition. So when I speak in this paragraph about life below the ground, I also speak about people that we don't see, that, let's say, we didn't see building bridges or fabulous buildings or making roads and, or I don't know, driving ambulance cars to COVID patients and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that's my interpretation of Kirill's piece in a way, but Kirill would have a different take on it and he would explain it differently. But let's say I'm just like sharing my own flow of thoughts that somehow got written down back then. Discreetly installed in the neighboring tree, whose roots cicades feed upon for years, a glass volume by Alexandra Sukhareva rests quietly. Inside it, a colony of crystals blossoming due to a chemical reaction when exposed to light. The micro world of crystals functions like an ancestral clock in the exhibition. It changes its appearance as hours go by. By the end of the summer, it will fade away. More crystals and clocks, both growing in glass and captured in photography, are awaiting visitor inside the pavilion. The floor of the second floor of the pavilion is covered with a synthetic material reminding memory foam. Visitors' feet sink into it and imprint traces that disappear a few seconds later. This way of treating the floor activates the remembrance of people who were here before us, but not here around anymore. The absorbing and disappearing nature of social memory touches the visitor from the very ground they stand on. The windows of the pavilion are encrusted with sheets of glass, in which a chemical reaction devised by Alexandra Sukhareva is occurring. The glass is covered with a metal grid created by Kirill Savchenkov. Its pattern comes from the studies of historic labyrinths. Together, these window assemblages by the two artists function as iconic locks of social memory and anticipation of future. We don't know what it will be, and the anxiety is already there. More mutualisms, like the two artists creating things together, make it more nurturing and awaited. So I'm like hinting at the anxiety that is already there. If to put it like very shortly, the subject of the, let's say the way like we can say the theme or like certain gravitational pull of the pavilion was the subject of premonition. And for Kirill Savchenkov, it was very much about premonition of informational autocracy. And for Sasha, for Alexandra Sukhareva, it was a lot about premonition of something to happen, but in a more sort of maybe like a morphological sense, that something can happen, like a cell may split into two. And there is that sort of like the state of matter that is on the verge of always something new becoming. But of course, there was also a premonition of worse things to happen, perhaps. We called the pavilion 914, and the title comes from a number that you see on the building of that pavilion, which is the number of when that building was built, which is 1914. And that's the year when the First World War started. And what we did, we removed the first digit, the first one, and left just like 914 as something like less described, like less determined, as something that could be both like 1,000 years from now in the future or 1,000 years from now in the past. And in a certain way, like when the war broke out in Ukraine, when Russia invaded, our premonition somehow found its prophecy, found its like end in the closure of the pavilion. Just to add like a couple of details about this project, there's a really interesting fact that the Russian pavilion in Venice Biennale is designed by the same architect, Alexei Shustsev, who designed the mausoleum of Lenin in Moscow. So it's like it's a tightly knit knot of meanings in this whole thing. As you probably know, the pavilion stayed closed and
right. But what do you make of? I mean, in a way, one could say that all transformation is violent. And if we think about that, if we think about it morphologically, it gives birth to new forms. And yet, I mean, that wonderful coincidence of the structure in which Lenin is embalmed, the structure in which stasis is enforced, is precisely the opposite of the violence of transformation. It tries to oppress or repress transformation. And that seems in a way completely opposite to the curatorial move that was made first as a kind of leitmotif of truth and confusion. And then, in fact, what moves from the metaphorical to the actual between the premonition and the actuality of Russia and Ukraine. So it feels like you want to deny, or no, I'll put it another way, that you want to accept and use as a platform the notion of the contingent, as a kind of way, as a narrative mode in what you do curatorially. Does that sound too fancy and complicated?
I love the notion of contingent, and let's say throughout the last 20 years, like it would surface and resurface and then like disappear, like in my own thinking. But I think in the last few years, contingency was quite present in just like, you know, in a daily flow of thoughts. And contingent to me also, in a way, it has to do with the notion of event and event that is somehow like formed and shaped by different forces. And there's always the force of contingency in any event. And maybe like what makes an event, or what makes something an event is very often due to the contingency that is somehow around there. And in that respect, like also like to me, doing projects, working on exhibitions, events, was always a way to, or let's say, an opportunity to be open to the contingency that would shape it, that would co-shape it together with yourself and like together with whoever were involved in it. But the contingency was always an active, if invisible, actor.
I mean, it makes me think of two philosophers, you know, of course, Alain Badiou, who wrote Being an Event, and how eventfulness itself carries with it ontological and political motivations. And then, of course, you know, recently, Yu Kui, the Chinese philosopher, he wrote a book, not the very last book, but the book before, which is about contingency and the way that he's proposing that contingency works, particularly in relationship to cybernetics. So it feels like this is very much of the moment, but that eventfulness is also something that, yeah, I mean, in a very practical way for the curatorial, eventfulness is that thing that happens when the contingent strikes and you can't have an artist that you wanted, or that artist, you know, announces to you, oh no, I want to do a very different work than the one that you wanted in the show, etc. So this feels like it's woven into the fabric of what we do, of what you do. I wonder if you could talk about that for a moment, both in relationship to these two shows so far, Truth and Confusion and 914.
When I think of like these two projects in a sequence, first one is an exhibition in Hong Kong, which is in 2021 is like very, very closed. Like I had to myself, like I went to Hong Kong and I had to do 21-day hotel quarantine on arrival. So those were the rules that now also seem, I mean, it seemed probably like debatable already then, but like now it seems even more debatable, but whatever. And together with Shue, we did a 9-month-long performance art exhibition with 21 new commission. So we commissioned 21 artists to make new works. And those works ranged from, let's say, sculptural listening devices by Tarek Atoui to new pieces, new songs by Lina Lepelite, to a new performance by Xavier Leroy and Scarlett Yu. And only two artists of the 21 were there at the opening and throughout the exhibition. Well, actually more. Trevor Young was also there but he lives in Hong Kong. But what I wanted to say that traveling was impossible.
Right.
And we had to, together with Shue Tan, we had to produce and oversee the production of the new works ourselves, like 20 new commissions. So it's very strange when you think of it, like, because of course I was also used to work where you go to another place, you meet with people coming from somewhere else, and you do something together. You are there, you share the presence. And being in Hong Kong throughout those several months was very different. So let's say the contingency, but the contingency that is really like on a macro level. And then with the Russian pavilion, like together with the two artists, we were halfway in terms of the production of that exhibition that spoke about premonition of many things, including the war. And then the war comes. The war suddenly occurs, and the pavilion is closed, and everything what was sort of being conceived gets stalled and suspended somewhere. So let's say when I think of these two projects like in sequence, it's very symbolic also, I think, like, and I don't know what to, I mean, like, what can one learn from it? Like, in some way, like, it's at least, you know, to me, it was like a big closure of like a big chapter of my own work and my own like path through the international landscape of arts in the last 20 years. But maybe I can still present briefly Mars Returns if we do.
Please do. And then we'll get to questions.
Yeah, because then the last project I've done last year is called Mars Returns, and so this is Mars Returns, and I will read a couple of poetry lines.
Great.
And the first one is from Ariana Reins. A bullet is like planet orbiting the brain. No heart will go unpunished, though it never entering. For though it didn't enter, yet it did and does and shall. For though we only saw it, it is moving through us still. So it's a bullet is like planet. And another passage is from Euripid, from Medea. I have to say, our ancestors showed very little sense when they invented melodies for revels, festivals, and feasts, the sweetest sounds in life, but made no songs or harmonies to soothe the bitter grief that leads to death and devastation and brings whole houses down. So these are like two passages that led into Mars Returns, and it obviously has to do with the war that started last year. So, and as you probably know, Mars, in the Roman god Mars, is the god of war, and there is also astrological aspect in the title. But in essence, it was an event of listening to bodies, to the sky, to each other, and to the sound, and to the building where this event took place. And the building in which this event took place is very also symbolic. It's Mykolas Žilinskas gallery in Kaunas in Lithuania. It was designed still in Soviet times. And then a construction process took some time. They opened it in 1989, the year when the Berlin Wall crumbled down. So in a way, like, you have this sort of like a product of Cold War, this building, and then it opens up when the wall changes. And then it stayed open for like almost 30 years as a art gallery that hosted the collection of Mykolas Žilinskas, the collector. And then in 2020, it got closed for renovation. And when I was invited to do a project in Kaunas, I realized that this building is just so perfect to speak about the current time, because it's like a character in the movie that comes from one system, witnesses the 30 years of openness and sort of that sense of infinite openness, and voyage to something like never-endingly new, and suddenly it's closed for renovation and the actual war starts. And whenever this building will reopen, whenever this museum will reopen, it will be a very different world. And so I invited a number of artists to simply allow this building to speak, and also allow us as visitors to, or as human beings, as bodies, to experience something that could be seen as grief, as mourning, and also as some kind of rejoicing, reconciliation, and hopefully finding something more meaningful to hold to, wherever that is, whether it's in your heart, or in someone else's hands, or in a planetary constellation, or in the way material world speaks to us. So let me see if the videos will work.
Great.
Okay. Do you see the video?
Yes.
Dishes when we've got mountains of skulls to shine. Labor and retribution will share, not girly secrets.
these videos are very short, so I have 3 more if we still have time.
Well, we're just about at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Maybe we should see if I see there are a couple of questions.
Okay, let's do that. So I stop sharing the screen.
Okay. All right. So the first person, Michael Hill, who's joined us pretty much every week, has said more of an invitation, if not already familiar, to peruse Irving Goffman's frame analysis and his discussion of fortuitousness and containment in fabrications as ways of making sense of our everyday experiences. It resonates for me with many aspects of your explorations. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, fortuitousness certainly is part of what we've been talking about, you know?
Exactly.
Do you have anything to say to that?
I can say that someone recommended me like Erwin Goffman 15 years ago. And I think I got a book back then and I was reading. And this is the second time Erwin Goffman comes back to the conversation. So it's a reason to read it again.
Yeah. And then Carolyn Strauss writes Guy Kuhl's book, Performing Mourning, Laments in Contemporary Art, is a wonderful resource for the issues you're discussing.
Thank you. I will definitely check this one.
Which, yeah, I don't know that book. So since it's 10:01, is there something you'd like to say in conclusion?
You know, Stephen, I would use this opportunity to play that one more video of Mars Returns because it's a very short one, and
Sure.
it's very, I think it would say better than I would do like 100 times.
Go for it.
By Ariana Reigns, who was part of Mars Returns, and it's one of the rooms in that exhibition, and it's just like the last 2 minutes of her recording that was there.
Okay.
And that will be, let's say, I could sign those words of hers.
It could be argued that when Medea tore up her own brother and gave the golden fleece to Jason and used her magic to help him succeed in the various tasks that he'd been tested to undertake, it could be argued that she was possessed, that she had become deprived of her own will by Athena's trick or by Eros' lust. But there's another way to think about these kinds of enrapturings when they're undertaken by adults, that you kind of walk into your seduction and also potentially into your own doom with your eyes open. Because you know you have to get out, and that seems like the only way out. Sometimes the will is a prison. It feels reactive or domineering, cruel and violent. I'm looking for something like a kind of a cleansed or a purified will, an experience of the will that has a kind of radical hospitality in it, something graceful, something gracious, something devotional. That's what I'm moving toward.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So I think it's time to end the public session. We'll move on to our session just with the students. So thanks to everyone who's joined us. And,
Thanks, everyone.
and come back next week where we'll have Inga Lacey, who is a CMAP fellow right now at the Museum of Modern Art in New York for the last of the curatorial roundtables this year. Okay, thanks, Ray. See you again in a moment.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.